Hello, and welcome to the second spotlight session. I see a lot of people joining already. So, this is the second spotlight session in a series of five such sessions this year. My name is Ruchira Goyal, and I'm the Next Generation India Future of Food Fellow and Executive of the Engine Room's People Action Group. As you join, please do introduce yourself in the chat. Am I audible? Well, okay, so I think it's working for most of us. So yeah, please do introduce in the chat yourself as you join, and let us know where you are joining from today. And if you have trouble understanding the spoken language, you are very welcome to turn on the captions at the bottom of the screen. And it is wonderful to see so many people joining. It's becoming a full room today. And some of you were present at the 2nd of April, where we launched the engine room with over 250 young change makers, and even at our first spotlight on April 26th. And have some of you have probably also signed up for the engine room. We are very grateful for your continued support. And for those of us who are new here for the first time, a very warm welcome again. So I will go to what is the engine room for the future? It is a digital platform designed to mobilize thousands of young change makers to share ideas and engage with the global system. Last year, we had more than 44,000 young people joining us throughout the year for the 2023 SDG Summit. And the engine room has four essential components: the action groups, the pit stops, spotlights, one of which is this, and the in person activations. The next generation fellows lead the five action groups aligned with the five P's, which are themes of the action groups, which are people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. And on April 8th, we onboarded 51 champions and change makers from across the globe to join the action groups. And throughout the year, the engine room will host four pit stops, which is the second part of the engine room, where we are hosting high-level digital events strategically planned to coincide with key moments in the UN calendar, like the engine room launch, which was on April 2nd, which offered a space for young people to share their ambitious visions and reflect on opportunities with champions both within and outside the multilateral system. The engine room will also host five spotlight sessions like the one today. These sessions are digital events that facilitate opportunities focused on intergenerational dialogue, tailored to support the exchange of ideas and perspectives from leading experts and young change makers. The five sessions throughout the year will mirror the human centered design stages, and we will explain more about that later. Finally, the engine room will host several in-person activations on the sidelines of key global moments, including the ECOSOC Youth Forum, the UN Civil Society Conference in Nairobi, which happened over the last couple of months, and also looking ahead at the Summit of the Future in September and COP29 in November, and so on. This is now our launch path that you can see. Here you see how all engine room components tie in together. So where does this session on challenge mapping fit in, and what are the human-centered design stages that I referred to earlier? If we go to the next slide, yeah, the engine room is fueled by human-centered design principles, which harness collective intelligence and creativity to design the 2100 roadmap. And this design approach empowers young people to develop solutions rooted in the real needs and experiences of young people and young countries by observing, engaging, and iterating ideas to integrate diverse perspectives, foster intergenerational collaboration, and nurture an open and inclusive environment for creative problem solving. And the approach encourages action groups to visualize current and future challenges through the eyes of young people and young countries, ensuring that our actions and ideas are not only viable but also resonate across diverse communities globally. And it places people at the center of everything we do. and is vital as we explore what we want our shared future to look like by 2100 and how the United Nations can better address the 21st century challenges across complex issues, from climate action to economic development. And the first step of this process is to empathize by exploring the lives of young people and young countries to understand the diverse current and future aspirations, struggles, and need. This session builds on the insights gained from our previous one on deep listening, which went with the empathize stage of the human centered design, and which identified and understood the key challenges that young people in young countries face. And this session is about breaking down the information gathered into specific actionable problems. It involves speakers from different backgrounds working together to pinpoint obstacles, risks, and factors that could affect the future well being of young people, including challenges with SDG implementation. And by categorizing these challenges, we prepare for the next steps of finding innovative solutions. This spotlight is a collaborative effort that ensures we have a clear view of the issues at hand, making it easier to target them effectively in later stages. And all of these stages feed into our collective engagement at the Summit of the Future and beyond. And now you will hear from a powerful and intergenerational panel of people who come from various walks of life, who have experienced a range of challenges which they have overcome, and whose work continues to focus on dismantling the barriers to the meaningful engagement of young people and civil society in decision making processes at all levels. And with that context in place, I would like to ask you all, what do you hope to achieve from this session? Do tell us in the chat, and you can also share your thoughts on the topics being discussed today on our Jamboard, a link of which we have or will be just sharing on the chat. And feel free to populate it with your views, thoughts, and ideas and contribute to our thinking on the road to 2100. And I would now like to introduce our keynote speaker for today's session. Yes. So Aya Shebi is a Pan-African feminist and diplomat whose mission is the liberation of African women and girls. She rose to prominence as a voice for democracy during the 2010-11 Tunisian revolution, which toppled a 23-year dictatorship. She has single-handedly transformed the youth leadership space across Africa and impacted over 1 million young people. She served as the first ever African Union Special Envoy on Youth and the youngest diplomat at the chairperson's cabinet in 2018 to 2021. And she's currently the founder of NalaFem, one of Africa's largest multi-generational alliances of women politicians and activists united towards transformative feminist change. I pass the power to you, Aya.
Thank you so much. I am absolutely thrilled to be here. Hello, everyone. I see over 70 change makers here. Thank you for having me, Engine Room. With a raise of hand, how many people are under 30 here? Let's see. How young is this audience? Amazing. I think this is an absolutely timely conversation about the future. I think it's a timely call to action for global solidarity because we seem as a humanity to fail to understand that we have only one planet to live on and each of us has only one body to live in. We are more connected than ever, and whatever happens here now in Tunis, where I am, impact what happens in Kenya or Pakistan or Turkey, wherever you are. So really, no one, absolutely no one, can close their borders or shut down their doors and say, let the world burn, it's none of my business. This is everyone's business, especially those who caused many of these challenges are the most accountable and must be held accountable. I think we all have to care at this point. We all have to be involved. We all have to play our part and empower other people to play their part, not exclude them. Because we are all going to be impacted by the future. And today we arrive, I think, at a crossroad of rising inequalities between countries, between communities. We see globally around 130 million girls out of school. We have frightening statistics about 12 million girls married before age of 18. 16 million adolescent girls give birth every year before age of 18 and facing higher risks of maternal mortality, of complications. We see a lot of job insecurity and food insecurity. I mean, in Africa alone, 239 million people were undernourished in 2020. And right now they're facing a food insecurity crisis and water scarcity because of climate change. And the list really goes on. These are things we all know. These are all United Nations statistics. But in all these issues, young people are dismissed and hurt and have to fight constantly for space, for participation, for leadership, and constantly have to be burned out and exhausted and even punished as human rights defenders. And when I say youth, I mean both in the system, in government, in multilateralism, and outside of all these spaces. Because both are facing different types of discrimination. Both are considered a threat, a dangerous class to the establishment, to those who want to keep things as they are, who are resistant to change. Because yes, half of the world population is under 30. I mean, this room is a testimonial to that. 70% of Africa is under 30. And this population will double by the end of the century. So it is definitely exhausting to see a lot of young people trying to make this change, but faced with resistance. And when young people do change things at the end, there is a lot of pushback. To take us back to square one, a lot of youth-led organizations, young feminist-led organizations, are put into this situation often constantly to justify. Make the case for why we should invest in girls. Make the case of why we should fund your organization. Make the business case of how reproductive health and rights will impact the GDP of my country. Why do we have to make the case to be free, to be human, to be respected, to be equal? And I think this is exactly at the heart of the conversation about the future. It means the future you want, if you subscribe to this understanding, is about monetary value. And the future we need to build is about freedom. So at the essence of conversations about the Summit of the Future and other spaces, yes, it has to include education and healthcare and jobs and technology and a lot of human rights. But are we talking about freedom and dignity, the underlying values before we talk about KPIs and measures and frameworks? And because if not, a generational misunderstanding about the future is going to increase. If young people keep screaming about 1.5 climate threshold in every COP, and the decision makers whose average age is 60 years old keep digging up fossil fuel, then it seems there is a generational understanding about what we want for the future and opportunity here for the Summit of the Future framework, or really any new UN process, to include three key approaches. One, for me, and most important one, is the future is intergenerational. The lack of representation and inclusion of diverse voices, particularly young feminists, in processes of decision-making and co-leading agenda setting of the Summit of the Future, particularly now, as we lead up to the process, is troubling. It is alarming that certain countries have written an open letter trying to restrict involvement of civil society. We made a lot of progress with the United Nations as an institution in bringing youth and decision-making closer, in advancing intergeneration co-leadership, and this is alarming. This is something I worked on for the past 15 years, where we were just two young people in UN, conference hall. But now seeing a lot of young people already participating and seeing this pushback and restriction will lead to a disconnect between the priorities of the youth and the outcome of the summit. But we can fix this now by really moving from this patronizing style of how we should do things, or we know what's right for you, into where are the youth in the room, in the government delegation, in the closed negotiation rooms, without the hierarchy of badges, of course. How do we make sure we mainstream youth in all these spaces to co-lead, to co-draft those policies, create a feminist space at the summit, consolidate existing consultations. We don't need to start a new process every time, and it's not too late to consolidate those efforts, because young people are your partners, not your competition. Young people have so much ownership of SDGs because the multilateral system at the time and the multi-stakeholder process that led from MDGs to SDGs, I've been heavily involved in it, and there were a lot of in the youth space. There is a lot of learning in the feminist space of this process, because there was something that was done right. And so if we take many of the reports, the recommendations, the statements by youth and feminist organizations, you already have the recipe for transformative process. You don't need to ask young people over and over about it. So let's fix this gap and get the ownership of the future generation about this process of the future. And that need to be resourced, to be inclusive, and to be transparent. The second is, I think the future is intersectional. There is a failure to address intersectionality, which means really the interconnectedness between different forms of discrimination and oppression based on class, on gender, on religion, age, disability, where you come from, your passport, your last name, your first name, based on many differences that we consider a rate of hierarchy based on skin color. And I say skin color and not race because there is only one race, the human race. As Toni Morrison says, racism is a social construct of one group to oppress another. So really ignoring our layers and layers of identities and treating our humanity in boxes will result in the same policies and initiatives that fail to address challenges that many groups face, youth, girls, refugees, and fix that and move away from this linear framework to a real intersectional framework. And third, I think the future is interconnected. As I said at the beginning, there are concerns about the summit's commitment to meaningful action of the multilateral system itself. Are we asking the right questions? Because how are we going to work together? Will some rich countries continue to have power over? Is it still going to be just symbolic measures? Still some lives will matter more than others? Are we going to continue with debt and AIDS syndrome to continents like Africa that nourish the world economy? We need to really ask these questions because we need to move from rhetoric to real solutions, root causes kind of solutions that is truly inclusive. And I think our interconnectedness as people, as citizens, as communities can facilitate that. So in conclusion, I think we have to address the who, the why, and the how of this future as much as we're focused on the what, the issue-based conversation. And to young people, first, please unite and rise above national, ethnic, religious, and other differences and boxes. Be first human. Don't be a product of systems of oppression conditioning our and future generations. And two, don't give up. I know it can be exhausting. It can be mentally, physically, even financially draining. A lot of youth organizations pay from their pocket to be at these spaces and push. It can be sometimes disappointing when you don't see results, but we must continue. It's our future at stake. And we're very privileged. In fact, those of us on a Zoom call, you have internet, and that's a privilege. 70% of Africa is offline. If you have access, if you have any type of access, you have a responsibility, so get involved. And I think, from someone who have been in this multilateral system for some time, my advice would be the best way to navigate such processes is to work together. You're not alone. Organize a consortium, speak with unity. Don't allow the system to say you're scattered, you're unorganized, you have too many demands. But really knock all the doors and build allyship in and outside the system. And if you feel right now you can't do anything, just be in solidarity with others, inspire action, elevate conversations until we make this right for future generations. And I hope to see many of you at the Summit of the Future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aya, for such a powerful opening to our spotlight session. You address so many important top points, addressing intersectionality, taking care of interconnections, having representation, and finally, the very powerful call to action to young people to use their privilege and to stand in solidarity. So, thanks a lot. And now I will pass the floor to Thais, who is our moderator for the panel discussion, and my colleague. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Hushida. Thank you very much, Aya, for your words. I think, as you said at the beginning, you were like asking how many of us are young people. And I wish more leaders of the world were hearing the words that you were just saying now. Like I feel that that's the public that unfortunately needs to hear a bit more of this. So thank you very much for bringing these powerful words, these powerful points that we will be for sure integrating our work. And yes, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to who is joining us. My name is Thais Feroz. I am United Nations Foundation Next Generation Fellow for Education, and also a storyteller from the Engine Rooms People Action Group together with Fuchira. And it's a pleasure for me to be here today moderating this powerful panel with people who work, make the difference, who can inspire us. And before we go into the panel itself, I just want to give you all a little bit of context. So we know that unfortunately, like the young people, they face a systemic and structural barriers to a meaningful engagement, to have leadership in decision-making processes. We are not included in the discussions. We need to fight for that space. We need to fight to be trusted. And this erodes our own trust in multilateralism, in the institutions, our will to contribute to the SDGs, like what the power, how we can influence big corporations, governments to take the responsibility and advance the SDGs. And in doing so, it's really like it fails the intergenerational partnerships that we can foster to really have this meaningful engagement of young people. So we young people hold the biggest stake in the future, but still we don't have the place to discuss what we want. So we want, in this panel here today, to try to bridge this gap. We're going to go into this like fantasy, amazing world that we want to make a reality. So we are going to reimagine our world and see what the 21st century needs and how we are going to build the roads to the 2100. So especially those who are joining the from the engine room, like please consume everything you can from the panelists, like to reimagine your plans, and together we can build the roads to 2100. So it's a pleasure for me to present to you our panelists. And we have Florence, who is the Executive Director of the SDGs Kenya Forum. Also Ben, who is the founder of Walk to Talk. Elida, who is the co-founder and founder of We Need to Talk. And Zainab, who is a program manager at Mahvari Justice and a member of the Engine Room's People Action Group together with me. So during the panel, I encourage all of you to join these discussions, to ask your questions to the panelists, use the Q&A feature to ask your questions directly to the panelists. We will select a few of them and ask at the end of the panel. And also use the chat to add your observations, your experiences, your comments. We really want to hear from you and to exchange, to be inspired by each other, to challenge each other. So we see how we can act like, with the leaders of the world, with those who have influence, and how we can get in these positions where we have the floor, where we have the power as well, because I trust all of us here have this potential, and together we can act, as Aya was just sharing. So please remember to get engaged and use all of what you're hearing today for imagining the roads to 2100. So before we begin, there is some questions that I was already touching on, and we will have answers to them in the panel. But I want to ask all of you. So a poll will appear here on the screen. And I want you to say if you agree or not with the phrases that will be said. So the first one is Nigeria's population is expected to reach 546 million by 2100, most of whom will be under the age of 30. And you can take your time to answer the poll. Yes, I see many of you are saying you guess it's true, and some are saying, of course it's true, but the agreeing with it is winning for now. Very well. We'll see this soon when we are answering the questions. So the question number 2 is 1 in 7 adolescents between the age of 10 and 19 experience a mental disorder. Do you agree with it? How is your feeling about it? Seeing many of you answering that yes, true, when we wish it wasn't as much. Many of us as a friend were in that case. Many of us think it's even more. It's just unreported. That's much probable. And yes, it it may sound false, but unfortunately, we will also discuss a little bit about this reality. So, question number 3. Every year, 12 million girls around the world are married before they reach the age of 18 years old. What do you think about this sentence? And yeah, this I feel that this poll is very upsetting. I see many saying like this happens in my country, which is a very, very sad reality. So I'm questioning like, is this even legal? We will see about the reality of some countries of the world, as Aya was saying, also the inequality among them and the responsibilities. Unfortunately, what we are seeing on these questions are for sure not beautiful. Dealing with the reality of our world is unfortunately not beautiful. And that's why it's more urgent than ever that we take the power, that we make the difference, that we make the change. And this is why I'm happy for us to have spaces like this, to have discussions like this, and why I'm glad to be able to moderate this panel where we can hear from each other and try to get inspired and try to learn a bit more where we can act, where we can use the power that we as young people have. So then I will go into the panel, and if we can have all the panelists here on screen. Thank you very much for joining us. And yeah, if we can just go straight into it, maybe I think I will start with Florence. And Florence, addressing like the first question that we had here on the screen, like the projected population growth in African countries, where most are under the age of 30. Like Nigeria, that is expected to reach 546 million by 2100. My question to you is, how can the Sustainable Development Goals be integrated into the national planning processes to ensure this like ecological sustainability and resource availability for future generations? And this also considering the colonial roots, like its historical and structural inequalities that continue to prevail today in the continent. I know it's a very hard question.
Oh. Thank you very much, Thais. And I hope you can hear me. Please confirm. Yes? You can
Yes,
hear
we
me?
can hear you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity to speak today, and also congratulations to the organizers of the Engine Room. Very, very creative innovation, and this is the way to go in terms of youth engagements and ensuring that the youth can connect, virtually, and conversations like this can go on. And let me thank Aya for very good opening remarks, and also just connecting that to the youth realities. And so, as said, my name is Florence Siebo, the Executive Director of the Kenya Forum, and I'm glad to share some of the perceptions as guided by the organizers. And I always say the questions or the conversation around the Sustainable Development Goals is very, very vast, and I always encourage all those that I speak to always make it a priority in terms of just getting more information. As they say, knowledge is power. Always just find out the latest reports and what's happening in different countries, whichever country you come from the Sustainable Development annual reports that come out every year. And so as we consider the projected population, the youth growth in Africa countries, yes, it's true that majority of Africa, we have 30 years and below. If to go a bit into the statistics, as of 2023, Africa was said to have 40% of the population below 15 years. Can you imagine? 40%. And then 70% of sub-Saharan Africa under the age of 30. And globally, 42%. And so 42% of world's population is global sub-Saharan African youth at 42%. And so that tells you that this, we should look at it not just as an immense challenge. Of course, the challenges are there, but also as a tremendous opportunity. And so it's true what you've seen on the statistics. Countries like Nigeria are expected to reach 546 million people by the year 2100. And so we need to amplify urgency in integrating sustainable development goals into national planning processes. And this, of course, needs to prioritize on the issues of the young people. It's unfortunate that a lot of governments, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, are still not prioritizing on issues, youth matters, and also practical responses to what the youth are going through, having changes in dynamics. This is a new era. There's a lot going on with the artificial intelligence, new ways of doing things, digitalization, a lot of the things that the youth are experiencing. We are finding that a lot of countries are still not at par, or even when they are aware, they're not still prioritizing. And then how can we do this? And so at the SDG Kenya Forum, we are committed to empowering youth here in Kenya, but also joining regional and global solidarity. Particularly, I'll give an example of the African Youth National Youth Delegates program that you can Google and look at it. This initiative is supported by the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs in collaboration with CRISP. It spans into 6 countries, namely Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Sudan, and Southern Sudan, Ethiopia. And the mission is to address and representation of global South youth at the United Nations and to ensure their voices are heard at the global stage. This might just seem like a very simple objective, but it's very critical to ensuring that young people are also represented in the Summit of the Future, in the high-level political forum, United Nations General Assembly, and many other United Nations processes that make decisions on behalf of populations all over the world. And so just moving in to say at national level, some of the issues that we need to prioritize as we're moving on as young people is to first and foremost, we must adopt a multifaceted approach. That means that there are many ways, but how do we prioritize on what is important? And first and foremost is youth engagement. As they say, nothing for us without us. This needs to be a reality for young people, ensuring that you're in places where decisions are being made, you're in processes at national level, regional level, and also at global level. For example, in this program that I've talked about, we engage young people in policy-making processes. We also ensure that they're represented in national and global spaces, but also we advertise or sort of just put out a call out there for youth that are well, and would feel that they can participate, have the time, and also the knowledge or expertise to come forth and be involved in this process, and linking them to the right processes. And this is important. There are many organizations with a lot of opportunities, but are not linking young people. So then how do we reach out and ensure that organizations at national, regional, and global levels can link young people? The second one is capacity building, and I cannot deliver at this point. We need to continuously build capacity. I believe this particular meeting today is also to build capacity of the young people, for them to understand what is going on in different countries and how they can plug in, how to get inspired, because it's by our own inspirations and our own engagement that we can showcase what is it that young people can do and how they want it done with the change in dynamics of our countries are. And so we need to continuously equip young people with tools for them to be able, and the knowledge and skills for them to engage effectively. Let's not let young people be in spaces where they're not well equipped or do not understand the processes. It's always good for us to make sure that every time they appear in tables, they have the right kind of evidence and information that is required for them to engage effectively. Again, the third one is public awareness and advocacy. There needs to be solidarity, the intergenerational conversations. There are those who have, of course, all of us who are once young people, or we will still also grow into other different ages, but how do we build solidarity across and ensure that we don't leave the young people behind? It's unfortunate that a lot of the development processes are leaving a lot of young people behind. How do we build this public awareness? How do we ensure that there's continuous advocacy by raising awareness on SDGs and how this relate? At this point, I'll say that if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals indicators, you'll find that 68 provide information directly relevant to young people. 68 of the SDG indicators. We have, the targets. We have 169 targets. And also, there are about 18 that are highly relevant to the young people. And so this is a good number to work with, given that we have only 169 and also the 232 indicators. And so it's important for us to ensure that young people understand what indicators and how they can plug in, and at country level, be it the monitoring, reporting processes, be it implementation, but, and also advocacy and awareness creation in schools, in just public places, and where the young people are at. The fourth one is practical experiences. We need to ensure that the young people who have experience, who have been or who have the privilege of being in different spaces, they can share this information very well, but also how for them to get spaces to do that, because sometimes the young people get experiences, but they do not get places and opportunities to share their experiences. And so we need to create more and more opportunities and also encourage them to share this kind of skills. Representation and networking is the other one. And so as we move along, we need to ensure that the young people are at the table, and I cannot deliver at this point. Let young people be represented. Let's come up with programs that prioritize on young people. Come up with programs that harvest youth voices, and these youth voices make it to the right places so that youth issues can be well addressed and moving on. And so as I conclude, I want to talk about addressing historical structural inequalities, because as you all know, the issues of structural inequalities have been there for many generations, especially in continents like Global South and in Africa. And so for us to do this, we need to continuously invest in policy reforms, and for us to understand what policies are hindering young people engagement, participation, and meaningful sort of representation. This is some of the things that are happening in many countries, and we need to showcase through programs that are actually working, but also in spaces where young people have been relevant in these processes. Inclusive governance. And this is to say that our countries, at both global, regional level, we need to see the young people, the women, we need to see marginalized communities, persons with disability, all these marginalized and special groups need to be at the table, and they need to be part of inclusive governance. We cannot have a governance that is not democratic. And then resource allocation, it's important for us to continuously allocate resources, because you cannot do all these things without resources. How do we ensure that there is more resources allocated to the SDGs, to some of these targets and indicators that directly speak to young people? I say this because during the Millennium Development Goals, I saw some of the resources that were allocated that are not there nowadays. And so then what is the issue? What is the challenge that is hindering us in terms of allocating resources and also ensuring that we can showcase that young people are a priority and they need to start learning what they need to learn, but also get the spaces to showcase their expertise and skills.
Absolutely.
And so in conclusion, yeah, I want to say that it's good for us to continuous have these conversations between the global South and also the global North young people, bringing together young people from all continents, but also having meaningful interventions and engagement throughout these processes. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to listening in to the vibrant conversations that will happen here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florence. I totally agree with you. And as you said, like opening the space for young people, like there's only so much that is us as young people can do in fighting for our spaces and really like looking for it. But we also need these opportunities, these structural opportunities. Thank you very much for sharing this. And my next question we go for you, Elida. And it's also a bit in the sense of structures, because like also considering the amazing work that you do, like your like feminist impulse in the United Nations, also the work you do with We Need to Talk in Turkey with menstrual health, like breaking this taboo, and with refugees. So we need to like consider that 1/3 of the global population is made up of children, but more than 41% of the world's refugees are children. That's data from 2022. So how can policies and initiatives be developed to better support the mental health, education, and well-being of these young refugees?
Thank you so much for the amazing question. And it is truly an honor to be a part of this panel. I'm sorry, I had to enter with a thank you because I'm truly grateful to be here. Thank you so much. I wish we had hours to discuss it, but in short, I'm standing here with two hats, or one big patchy hat maybe. On one side, I'm the co-founder of a youth-led feminist NGO, We Need to Talk. I know it sounds like the first sentence of a breakup speech, but this is exactly what we want to do. We want to start conversations, honest and open conversations about a topic that no one wants to talk about, not necessarily in my community, not necessarily in Middle East, but as a global problem. With We Need to Talk, we work on period poverty and menstruation stigma. And since February 2023, many of our participants might remember there was a devastating earthquake that happened in Turkey and in Syria, affecting millions of people. So we have prioritized our work mostly on the fieldwork in the earthquake zone, and we're providing menstrual care support to survivor menstruators. In addition, I stand here with another tiny hat as one of the 17 young leaders for the SDGs, and our painful yet rewarding work, painfully slow in its impact, but rewarding work with regard to youth engagement in SDGs agenda. Based on all this, but mostly informed through my firsthand fieldwork experience in the earthquake zone, I have a few things in mind. But again, these are just major ideas, and I'm happy to discuss this further with the questions in detail. I work quite a bit with refugee communities and migrant communities in Turkey, with Palestinian communities, Iranian, African, Syrian communities, Afghan communities, in the sense that intersectionally, refugee and migrant communities experience period poverty and menstruation stigma in a deeper and more complex way. What I've seen as a young feminist myself working in the field, one of the biggest issues that we need to transform or tackle in a way is that the field workers or the staff that is there to help out young refugees cannot help themselves but assume their needs, assume their contexts and realities and demands. Young refugees need this. Young refugees do not know how to give themselves menstrual care properly. Young refugee girls need more socio-psychological support than young refugee boys, and so on. So this is all based on assumptions and not necessarily on the first-hand experiences of the young refugees themselves. So it is really imperative to center their voices and their experiences without assuming their needs or their demands, without necessarily talking to them. Often the people in the fields come there with a prepared agenda, a prepared program. They know what to do before actually speaking to the subjects, to the young refugees who are going through the everyday realities there. One crucial aspect is that, I think, to center the voices and experiences, and most importantly, centering firsthand storytelling, not necessarily as an inspirational little colorful section in the beginning of these fancy big international summits, but truly creating them space, giving them time and opportunity to tell their stories themselves, not necessarily sending the diaspora members, for example, not necessarily sending me. I do not represent the experiences of young refugees living in Turkey. I happen to be supporting them. I happen to be a part of a civil society movement, but I'm privileged enough to speak English. I'm able to exist in platforms like this, but I do not represent the experiences of young refugees. So first-hand storytelling is incredibly important, developing specialized support programs, and most importantly, specialized mental health support programs that are tailored to the unique experiences of young refugees in the field, by offering trauma-informed care, by offering counseling services and psychosocial support. But here I'd like to re-emphasize psychosocial support. Often it is confused with psychosocial first aid. Psychosocial first aid is incredibly important, especially for young refugees who are living shortly after the natural disasters, or who are just out of the armed conflict, or who are just out of the humanitarian crisis. Psychosocial first aid is incredibly important, but psychosocial support in the long term requires long-term and sustainable financing. It requires building strong relationships with the communities and not having one-time interactions with them. And it is about addressing the psychosocial impacts of displacement and conflict and providing essential tools for resilience and healing. And an important part of it is to provide these tools and skills to the members of the refugee community themselves, because they're able to transform and they're able to dismantle important structural barriers like the language barrier, for example. These are mostly the first ideas that come to my mind. I want to keep it short and nice here, but this is my experiences from the fieldwork in the earthquake zone for more than 1.5 years. And we're still working on it. I know that my expertise is quite niche, but menstrual health and menstrual experiences tell us quite a bit about our experiences with our bodies, tell us quite a bit about exclusion, and so on. So I will leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing. Like, for sure, it's niche. All of our own experiences are niche, but it makes a lot of difference. Also, as you said, like breaking these barriers for us to be able to take our own lead. And we know like what is better for us. Like the people know what they need. Many times we need to be able to provide them with the opportunity. So thank you very much for sharing this. And I want to remind everyone, if you have any questions to the panelists, I've seen some in the chat, but they do get lost in the chat. So please use the Q&A feature, so then we can select them and the panelists can also see them and prepare to answering to you. So use the Q&A feature if you have any questions. And also I will ask every panelist to keep your answers short as well, as we are running a bit out of time. But Zainab, you were next on my questions. And we have the reality that we saw here before, unfortunately, of every year, 12 million girls around the world being married before they reach the age of 18. So my question to you, also considering like the work you do in Pakistan with taboo topics, how can gender inequality be effectively addressed to unlock the full potential of young people?
Thank you so much for this wonderful question and really this wonderful opportunity as well. I believe that everyone has a starting point in their life. And for me, that starting point was in 2022. Pakistan was hit by one of its worst flash floods in recent years, and the devastation was unimaginable. Millions were made homeless at that time. I remember I stumbled across a post on Instagram at that time. There was this woman in black chadar, and she was holding a dignity kit in her hand. What shocked me most about that picture was that I didn't know up until that point that you could donate sanitary pads for relief efforts. What shocked me further was that I didn't think that all of those women who have been made homeless, how are they going to manage their periods? Because they don't have accessibility to necessary items. I volunteered there and then to the youth movement that I'm managing right now, Mahwari Justice. At that time, 8 million young girls and women of reproductive age were denied access to such essential products because they were considered a luxury and not a necessity. So they weren't included initially in the relief packages. When we started working on this cause, we were able to provide 150,000 dignity kits to women and girls across nation at that time. After 2 years of working on this cause, I've come to this realization that at the crux, it might seem like that all we are talking about is safe periods, but that's not the case. There is a direct relation between a girl getting her periods and discontinuation of her education. In many parts across the world, even now, a girl getting her period is seen as a sign that she is eligible for marriage, no matter the age that she is getting her periods at. This very brutal cycle, it pushes them to early childbirths, high fertility rate. It pushes them to gender-based violence and financial dependency, essentially. So coming back to your question, in my humble opinion, from my experience, what I can tell you is this, that this is an individual struggle at the end of the day. We need to understand that gender inequality, it's not a female problem. It affects all of us. And we also need to understand that for all of us to progress, we can't leave anyone behind. So what we can do is that we can start these simple yet very difficult conversations. We can reevaluate our own personal biases. We can hold each other accountable and really come to terms with the fact that gender parity gap, it needs to be reduced. So basically, let's not wait for government policies to change. This is something that we all can do at our own individual levels. Maybe you don't know where to start. You can volunteer to your local women-led initiative. And I really hope that along the way, you will unburden yourself from all the generational old harmful practices. Whenever I'm asked, especially in Pakistan, that how can we as individuals contribute against this monstrous anomaly of gender inequality? So my answer always is that, listen to women, ask them to speak up. You have to provide them with platforms where they can share their solution, or you have to include them where decisions are being made. You have to make this conscious effort on your day-to-day basis. Because really, I don't actually understand that we envision a future that is sustainable, that is progressive, that is better. And at the same time, 50% of the world population is not empowered. It basically lives in inequality. I don't think so such future we can achieve without women's contribution. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Zainab. I absolutely agree. And these points are so important when we think about the future. And also it goes a little bit in the same sense, the question that I'm going to ask to Ben now, because it's also about how us young people deal directly with it. You can share a bit of your own experience. I know you had like a long journey when talking about mental health, which is also very important aspect of health. And if we consider that globally, 1 in 7 adolescents between the age of 10 and 19 experience a mental disorder, from which anxiety and depression account for 40% of these cases. So what are the main challenges that you face in advocating for the necessary mental health support for young people? And how can we ensure that those in position of power can prioritize mental health especially given the increasing pressures and future challenges faced by young people today that we don't even need to mention here.
Right, yeah, thank you. And I'll just echo what everyone else has said, which is it's a real honor to be here. Thank you all for making time to be here as well. I think it shows a lot that you've taken time out of your day to come and be part of something like this. So thank you. Mental health. My story starts 6 years ago. I fell into this very unexpectedly. I was still at school. I was 17 years old, and my brother was 15 years old. He was diagnosed with clinical depression. At the time, I had no idea what that was. No one had ever spoken to me about mental health or depression. That was just not something that I'd ever come across before. Very, very unexpectedly, in January 2018, Sam took his own life and died by suicide. He was 15 years old. And for me, that was obviously an incredibly traumatic experience. But also, whilst I was in school, I sort of started speaking to people that I was friends with and people in my school, and I realized that so many people were dealing with things that they weren't telling anyone about. And so I became really passionate about trying to empower people to be honest about the bad stuff or the stuff that you wouldn't normally want to share. But also, that sort of developed into leading on sort of policy changes, working with the government, pushing for all sorts of different changes in the UK where I live. And I'll just echo actually what Zainab said, which is that actually when it comes to mental health, it can become quite overwhelming. The policy side of it can become very, very overwhelming in terms of the mountains, literal, legal, and political mountains that you sometimes need to climb to create change. But actually, individually, every single one of us has the power to change someone else's life, but also our own. And I think what drives me is sort of doing a lot of the policy work, but actually, how can we educate people on what they can do, the power that they possess to improve someone's life or their mental health? What can we educate people on around our own mental health to look after ourselves a little bit better? That's what drives me, and that's what Walk to Talk was. It was about getting people onto a walk and having those honest conversations about our mental health. From a policy point of view, some of the challenges have been there's been so many challenges, as I'm sure everyone on this panel has had as well. The biggest one with mental health is stigma and misunderstanding. In the UK, suicide was illegal. It was against the law until 1961. I know it's still illegal in a lot of countries around the world. Mental health is massively stigmatized. It's still seen as a sign of weakness, as someone being crazy or dangerous. Combating those misconceptions about mental health is really important, because until we can get a well-educated, well-informed leader, they're not going to make decisions that are in the best interest of the people that we need to help. So I've spent a lot of time trying to educate leaders, prime ministers on mental health and what it actually means, but also direct their focus to young people, because really, if we want to make change in global mental health and improve global mental health, we need to be investing in preventative measures, education, and early access to treatment for young people, and that's just not here at the moment in the UK. And so that's what I do. That's my day to day, beating the drum for policy changes for young people. And it's a lot harder than it should be. For something that makes sense, it's a lot harder than it should be.
Absolutely.
So that's what I do.
Thank you very much, Ben, for sharing. I absolutely agree. I didn't even know that suicide was illegal, and I don't even think prohibiting something by law is going to prevent it from happening, right? Like it's really, as you said, the educational part, like how we do stigmatize, how we learn to talk about our feelings, how we learn to develop emotional intelligence. So thank you very much for sharing this. I agree that this is a collective effort that we all need to face, and unfortunately, it's much harder. It's much harder than it should be. Absolutely agree with you. And from the panel, I have, oops, sorry, I just lost it here. We had some questions that were asked. Unfortunately, there's too many questions. I mean, great that we have so many questions. Maybe you can go in the Q&A and try to answer it. But I saw one from Valentine to all the panelists, and then you have to be really quick and answer like in 1 minute. Which is, what is the most like binding capacity constraints that you and your organizations encounter when designing, implementing, and evaluating policies and programs aiming to address these issues that are affecting the young people? So it's like how we can make the policies really like happen, and what are the constraints that you face? And maybe we go in now in the opposite order. Maybe Ben, you want to start?
Yeah, definitely. I think I understand the question, but it's sort of around the barriers that we've and what we've had to overcome in terms of actual policy. Firstly, I think we've mentioned it before, is actually listening to the people that are being affected by policy. It still surprises me how many leaders, political leaders, will make decisions without ever speaking to an expert or someone that's being affected by the policy they're talking about. For me, it's those stories that I have the ability to present to these leaders. So I've been part of evidence hearings in government in the UK, where actually I've sat there and presented other people's stories to leaders and sort of storytell around the why this policy is needed. Not why is this policy needed for some economic idea, but actually the real human story. Why is this needed? Let's hear from those people. And that's sort of been my approach, is actually like, yes, I can provide the data and we can go through all this economic analysis, but it's the human stories, getting people with lived experience in front of those decision makers.
Thank you very much. So maybe now we can go to you, Zainab. How can we break these barriers?
I'm just going to take ahead what Ben was talking about, because that is very important in even our context right now. One of the most important thing is that you cannot have borrowed solutions and then think that they will sustain for a very long time. What we really need, and like what we based our programs on, is the local community-driven solutions, because these are the only things that in long run are going to be effective. I'll just tell you a very quick small story to just clear it up. During 2022 flooding, when we were sending the dignity kits to the interior parts of Sindh and Balochistan, we were using the sanitary pads. And what we got to know from our on-ground volunteers was that a lot of the women didn't even know what those sanitary pads were. They have no clue. So they kept asking that, what are these? Why are you giving this to me? I don't even know how to use it. At that time, because the problem was so huge, we couldn't even think around what to do and how to do. So the simplest thing was that we started adding illustrations to those kits. But as time moved on, we changed the entire kit design. We started adding the cloth and the cotton that they were asking for. So it's very important that when policies are being made or programs are being implemented, you need to have the local community at the base. They can only tell you what solution can work and what can't work. We can't impose that on them. We can help them come up with like a better way to implement that solution, but in the end, they are going to be the leaders of the development or the change in their own specific communities.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much, Zainab. Grassroots solutions all the way up. Absolutely agree. Elida, then to you, how would you say that we can break this barrier for the policymakers?
Thank you so much. I resonate with all the things that my amazing fellow panelists have said. In addition to that, 2 points. One, we need to convince the funders that they need to provide us core funding so that the people who are leading such initiatives, we are representatives of such initiatives and the participants in this very meeting. The people who are leading the initiatives need to sustain their well-being and need to keep doing what they do in the long term. So sustainable core funding is incredibly important instead of one-time number-based project funding. Secondly, we need to share all these ideas not necessarily only with the people who agree with us, who are on the same page with us, but with different stakeholders who might be opposing us, different stakeholders who are powerful in different aspects of life. And one of the most important meetings is upcoming, the Summit of the Future. It's an incredible opportunity for us to galvanize the momentum and to share what we think with other stakeholders who have, we're equal stakeholders with them, do not get me wrong, but they might have more financial power than us or more governance power compared to us. So it's important to expand our work and our advocacy to other stakeholders. And I see the Summit of the Future approaching as an important point, as an important opportunity to do so.
Thank you very much. I absolutely agree. And unfortunately, the financing is what is leading much of the change. And as you said before, like, why do we need to make the case? But unfortunately, we do. Unfortunately, we do, and these moments are very important. And Florence, Elida was here agreeing with everyone, a panel where everyone agrees. Maybe you want to disagree with us. I don't know. How would you say that we can challenge and we can break this barrier for the policymakers? I think you answered a little bit on that, but if you have like a final message for us.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just to agree with all the panelists, very amazing contributions. But also to add that the evidence-based policy engagements, we need a lot of evidence to showcase why the gaps that are existing among the young people and what needs to be done. Practical ways of doing that, because sometimes a lot of policymakers have no clue or clueless in terms of some of the interventions or how to prioritize on young people, especially with the dynamics of young people. And so there needs to be a lot of investment in research and data that can showcase maybe some of the gaps, but also how to intervene. Lastly, the issue of political goodwill, and especially in a lot of the sub-Saharan countries, challenge with the change of regimes, governments that do not prioritize on young people. And so there could be policies, but they're not implemented, or coming up with policies. There are a lot of hurdles in legislation and also in implementation. So then how do we come up with solidarity, or how do we empower youth from these countries to ensure that existing goodwill can be utilized, but also where there's no goodwill, how to mitigate that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think what you all said here, like this evidence-based approach, that we have like a multifaceted approach. And yes, unfortunately, we need to count on goodwill. But as I like to say, we do not need to reinvent the wheel. There is so much already out there. There is so many policies, there is so many documents, there is so much being said. We really need this action on like the goodwill for implementing it. Thank you for bringing it. Unfortunately, we are at time with the panel. And there was also someone illustrating us live, like the things that you were sharing here. So I want to thank you very warmly for answering these questions, for taking this time to doing this contribution. I'm sure that everyone who is here joining us is taking notes and like making the machines of our brains work, so we can think how to design this road trip to 2100, really take the action in our documents that we are doing. So thank you very much, Florence, Zainab, Elida, and Ben. It was a pleasure having you here today. And I will then, all the questions that you asked in the Q&A, we will be storing them and we will be using them in the discussions with the fellows, in the discussions with the engine room, so we can continue using this in the Road to 2100. So thank you very much. And I will pass the word back to Ruchira.
Thank you so much, Thais, and thank you all the panelists for those great discussions. I will now like to invite Ipsita, and while we've all been listening intently throughout today's session, she has joined us to create a live illustration of all that has been shared. So she would take the floor, share her screen, and say a few words about her illustration and some key reflections that she has incorporated into her design. And we would love to hear what you thought of today's session as well in the chat. So requesting all the audience members to also share their reflections as Ipsita is sharing hers. Over to you, Ipsita.
Hello, sorry, I was just connecting the screen. Yeah, I've tried to illustrate all the important discussions that we had, the important, some amazing quotes that I saw come up discussing about gender equality, about for global solidarity, as well as the three-step approach that Aya shared initially. So yes, you can have a look. It's a road that I'm sort of building as we're kind of navigating the challenges.
This looks great, and I'm sure we will share this with the audience after this session. So thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us today. It has been a great start or end to the day, depending on where you're joining from, with meaningful and insightful conversation. I would like to thank our moderator, Thais, and our speakers, Aya, Florence, Ben, Eliza, and Zainab, who took the time to come in from the different parts of that they are joining us from and share their experiences. I hope that our action groups were able to learn by listening and realize that there is power in stories of young people, power in their voice, and most importantly, in their work. So, as shared at the beginning of the session, these insights are particularly valuable as we embark this journey centered in human-centered design to build the 2100 roadmap. And your voice and your feedback are important, and we want to hear from all of you. And we request you to take 10 minutes of your time and just take this youth survey that we are rolling out to capture all your perspectives. It is being shared on the chat now and help us to shape a future that includes young people's dreams and ambitions through the survey. Yes, Ishan has just shared it, so please do look at the survey. And we know that many of you are enthusiastic about also getting involved or are already a part of the team if you have signed up for the engine room. And do join us in our next spotlight sessions that are coming up and become a part of our action group if you're interested. There are many opportunities for you to continue staying involved with the engine room and the United Nations Foundation's work. If you want to participate directly in the development of the learning agenda, we are hosting town halls across the world in some countries, and you can join the ones nearest to you. And again, we will be sharing more information on this in the chat soon. Here you can see where these town halls are happening in countries across the months coming up. And as our action groups work towards building the 2100 roadmap, again, we encourage you to share your perspectives through the previously shared youth survey. As we continue on this journey of collaborating and building the 2100 agenda, please do join us for the next engine room pit stop, which is going to be happening on 3rd of July. And this will be on future-proofing the SDGs aligned with the high-level political forum. And again, then happening in August, on 12th August, is the spotlight number 3, where we would like you to join us for a creative brainstorm that will build on today's insights and shift the focus towards now identifying solutions to accelerate urgent SDG investments that will yield high returns for young people. And all of these spaces are for you to contribute your experience and thoughts to the Summit of the Future processes, which, as a reminder, is the UN's way of thinking about its own future and how to improve its work to deliver for you, that is the young people. And we need your voices front and center for that. Finally, I would like to conclude by saying that it has been my pleasure and honor to host all of you and our esteemed panelists. Let us stay connected. Be sure to follow the Our Future Agenda page on social media for more such insights, events, and opportunities. It has been great having you all, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much. Looking forward to more engagement through all of these channels.
Thank you for the amazing conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. I think all the audience members are also very impressed and leaving their thanks for all of the panelists. Thank you.